You are carrying something right now that you have not been able to put down. I want to begin there because I think it is important to name it before we go any further. It is not the dishes or the schedule or the list of things that did not get done. It is something heavier. It is the worry about the person in your home who has drifted from where they used to be. It is the marriage that has grown quiet in the wrong kind of way. It is the child you pray for every night and who does not know you are praying. It is the financial pressure that lives in the walls of the house, invisible but constant, changing the temperature of every room. It is the sense, quiet, persistent, sometimes suffocating, that you are holding everything together by willpower alone, and that if you stopped for even a day, something would collapse. You are the woman of faith in your home. And sometimes being the woman of faith in your home is the loneliest assignment in the world, because you believe, you pray, you bring the burdens to God, and you leave them there, and then you pick them back up on the way out the door because there is no one else to carry them. You have been faithful for so long, in ways no one fully sees, in prayers no one fully knows, and you are tired. Not faithless tired. There is a difference, and I think it is important to honor that difference today. I want to give you something today. Not an encouragement that dissolves before morning, not a collection of good thoughts to carry into a difficult week, something durable, something that women brought to the door of my monastery for over 20 years and left with, and came back months later to tell me what it had done in their homes, something ancient and tested and alive. I want to give you a psalm, a specific psalm, and I want to tell you exactly how to use it and what I have watched it do and why I believe with everything in me that if you do this one simple and serious thing, you will watch God begin to move in your home in ways you stopped believing were possible. The psalm is the 91st. You may know it, you may have read it before, but I want to ask you gently and seriously to receive it today as though you have never heard it, because I think there is a way of knowing a psalm intellectually that is entirely different from the way of letting a psalm enter you. The first kind of knowing leaves you exactly where you are. The second kind changes things. And the difference between them is not intelligence or education or even faith in the conventional sense. The difference is attention, slowness, the willingness to let the words do something in you rather than merely pass through you. That is what I am going to ask of you today. But before we reach the psalm itself, I want to tell you something about why this particular psalm and why 3 times a day and why I believe the combination of those two things has a specific and real spiritual particular a household. Because I do not give instructions without reasons, and I do not recommend practices. I have not watched work in real lives over real years. Some of the most vivid encounters I had at that door in Detroit over more than 20 years were with women. Mothers who had come on behalf of sons who would not come themselves. Wives who had come on behalf of marriages that were failing in ways they could not name to anyone. Women who were holding their households together by the force of a faith that was being tested by everything around them and had not yet broken, though it was bending. Women who were not looking for miracles in the dramatic sense. They were looking for the ground to stop shifting, for the door of their home to become, once again, a place of peace rather than a place of dread, for the people they loved to be protected from the things that were threatening them. I prayed with these women. I enrolled their intentions in the Seraphic Mass Association so that the prayers of the entire Capuchin community would be joined to their own. And I gave many of them this psalm, not as a formula, not as a magic text, as a living word, as the specific vocabulary of a faith that believes God is present in a home, active in a family, genuinely responsive to the prayer of a woman who stands in the gap for the people she loves. And they came back, many of them, not always to report the dramatic reversal, more often to describe something quieter and more durable, a change in the atmosphere of the home. A son who had not spoken in months who sat down at the dinner table one evening and was simply inexplicably present. A husband whose anger had been the weather of the house for years, who came home one night and for reasons no one could explain, was different. A financial situation that had not resolved, but had somehow stopped feeling like a sentence. A household that had been operating under a heaviness that lifted not all at once, not permanently, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to believe again. I am not describing the psalm as a tool that delivers results. I want to be careful about that, because the psalm is not a tool and God is not a machine. I am describing the psalm as a door, a specific fitted ancient door into the presence of a God who is already at work in your home, who is already working before you found this video, who does not need to be persuaded to care about the people you love. He already cares. With a depth and a specificity that makes your own love for them look like a shadow. What the psalm does is open you to that reality. It clears the interior space that fear and worry and exhaustion have been occupying and makes room for the awareness of a presence that was never absent, only unnoticed, in the noise of everything you were carrying. Now let me give you the psalm. It opens with these words: "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." Woman of faith, I want you to stop for a moment with those first lines, because the first line is not a promise addressed to you. It is a description of a position, a location. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. The word dwells is important. Not visits, not passes through occasionally. Dwells, makes a home in, settles into. There is a difference between a woman who has heard of the shelter of the Most High and a woman who lives there. The promises of this psalm are not for the woman who has heard of it. They are for the woman who dwells there, who has made that shelter the primary location of her interior life. And this is exactly why 3 times a day matters. Not as a rule, as an architecture, as a way of building through practice the habit of returning. Because the nature of the human mind is to drift. In the morning you dwell. By afternoon the worry has pulled you out of the shelter and you are standing in the open again, exposed to everything the day has brought. The second reading of the psalm is the return, the second dwelling, the deliberate choice in the middle of the day to come back inside. And by evening, when the house is quieter and the accumulated weight of everything you have carried settles on you most heavily, the third reading is the sealing, the closing of the door. The declaration, before you sleep, that you and your household are under a covering that does not depend on your own strength or vigilance to hold. 3 times a day builds a structure, not a feeling, a structure. By the end of the first week, you will not just be reading a psalm, you will be rebuilding the interior architecture of your faith. You will be reinforcing with each return the conviction that the shelter is real, that it holds, that the God who offered it meant it and keeps it. Let me continue with the psalm, because every line has something to give you. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. Woman of faith, hear what is being described here. Not a God who might protect if the conditions are right, a God who covers, a God whose faithfulness, not your faithfulness, his faithfulness, is the shield. This is the ground the psalm stands on, and the ground it invites you to stand on, his faithfulness. Not the consistency of your prayer, not the quality of your faith, not the record of your spiritual life, his faithfulness, which does not waver, which does not have a bad week, which does not grow tired of covering the same people in the same home with the same needs year after year. I want to speak now about something I watched happen at that door many times, and I want to be specific because I think the specific is where the truth lands most heavily. There was a woman who came to me, I will not use her name, whose son had left the faith and left the family and gone somewhere that no one in the household would speak about directly, but that everyone feared. She had been praying for him for years. She was not a woman without faith. She had enormous faith, but somewhere in those years of unanswered prayer, something in her had quietly begun to conclude that her prayers were not reaching their destination, that perhaps the distance her son had traveled was too great, that perhaps God had given her son a freedom that even her intercession could not overcome. I gave her this psalm, and I told her to read it 3 times a day, every day, without missing, not as a demand on God, as a declaration of trust, as a daily, specific, renewed act of placing her son under a covering she believed in, regardless of what she could see. I told her, you cannot see into the spiritual dimension of your son's life. You do not know what is moving, what is softening, what is being prepared. What you can do is stand in the shelter of this psalm every day and declare, as an act of faith and not of sight, that this covering extends to him. She came back 18 months later. The son had come home. I will not give you the details. That is his story, not mine to share, but I will tell you that his return had nothing to do with any dramatic intervention anyone in the family had engineered. Something had shifted in him, in the interior of his own life, in a process that no one in the family had access to or control over. And when I asked her what she thought had changed, she said, I stopped trying to reach him and started standing in the psalm. I stopped trying to reach him and started standing in the psalm. I have thought about that sentence many times since she said it, because I think it contains something essential about the difference between the prayer that exhausts and the prayer that transforms. The prayer that exhausts is the prayer that keeps trying to force the outcome. That keeps throwing its weight against the door of another person's will, trying to push it open. That runs itself ragged because it is trying to do something that is not its job to do. The prayer that transforms is the prayer that does its own job. That stands in the shelter. That declares the covering. That trusts the God whose covering reaches places and people and interior lives that no human prayer can directly access, and then releases the outcome to him completely and without a deadline. The psalm is the architecture of that prayer, not of a desperate, pushing, exhausting intercession, but of a settled, daily, trusting declaration. I am in the shelter. My household is in the shelter. His faithfulness is the shield. I will not be shaken. Let me continue. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. Woman of faith, I want to speak about the terror of night, because I think it is one of the most specific and least addressed dimensions of what women who carry their households go through. The terror of night is not a metaphor for me. I watched it in the faces of the women who came to that door. The 3 a.m. worry, the silence of the house when everyone else is asleep, and the mind finally has the space it has been waiting for all day to show you every possible way that everything could go wrong. The child who might be making choices you cannot see. The husband whose distance has been growing in a direction you do not understand. The bill that arrives in 2 weeks for which there is no plan. The illness that has not been diagnosed, but that your body has been sending you signals about for months. The terror of night is very specific, very personal, very real. And the psalm says, you will not fear it. Not, you will be protected from the things that cause it. You will not fear it. The fear itself, the specific, exhausting, nighttime fear, is what the shelter of the Most High addresses. Not by removing the circumstances, but by providing a ground to stand on that is more solid than the fear. A faithfulness that does not stop operating at 3 a.m. A covering that does not thin out when the darkness is most complete. This is why 3 times a day, and why the 3rd reading specifically at night before sleep, is not a ritual but a necessity. You are not performing a spiritual discipline. You are building, brick by brick, a structure inside yourself that can hold when the terror comes. You are training your interior to return to the shelter as its first response to the darkness, rather than its last resort after everything else has failed. You are making the psalm the architecture of your nights. I want to give you the central promise of the psalm now, because I think it is the one that women who carry their households need to hear more than any other. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. He will command his angels concerning you, not concerning the world in general, concerning you, specific, personal, named. The God who made you did not make you in general. He made you in particular, with a particular name and a particular household and a particular set of people he placed in your life for purposes that extend beyond what you can currently see. And the covering he provides is not a general covering like a weather system that happens to pass over your area. It is specific, commanded, addressed to you. I have always found something very grounding in the language of command in this psalm. For he will command his angels. Command. This is not a God who hopes things will be all right for you. This is not a God who is watching from a distance with goodwill and no action. This is a God who gives commands on your behalf, who issues orders in the spiritual realm that relate to the safety of your household, who has assigned specific and active protection to the life and the home of the woman who dwells in his shelter. Woman of faith, you are not alone in your home. You are not the only one standing watch. The God who gave you these people to love has not left the protection of that love entirely to your own prayer and your own vigilance. He has commanded. He is active. He is moving in the lives of the people you love in ways that your eyes cannot see and your prayer cannot fully account for. And the psalm is the daily reminder of that reality, not a reality that requires your constant confirmation to remain true, but a reality that your constant confirmation aligns you with so that you can receive the peace it contains rather than missing it in the noise of everything you are carrying. Let me give you now the closing promise of the psalm, because I think it is the one that ties everything together. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation, because he loves me. The protection is not the reward for perfect performance. It is not the consequence of adequate prayer frequency or sufficient spiritual discipline. It is the response to love. To the simple, genuine, imperfect, daily love of a person who turns toward God with what they have, with the tired faith and the cracked vessel and the prayers that sometimes feel like they go nowhere. Because she loves me, I will answer her. I will be with her in trouble. I will deliver her household. This is the God of this psalm, not the God of conditions and contracts and performance reviews, the God who responds to love with rescue. And a woman of faith who reads these words in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening before she sleeps, and who reads them not as information but as the vocabulary of a relationship, as the specific language of a love between her and the God who made her and made her household, that woman is building something that does not depend on her circumstances to hold, something that holds when the circumstances are at their worst, something that has been tested in more homes and more families and more impossible situations than I can count, and that has not failed. I want to close with one practical instruction, because I think the most important thing I can give you today is not only the psalm, but the specific posture in which to read it. This is what I told the women at that door in Detroit, and this is what I am telling you. Do not read the psalm as a text. Read it as a declaration. Out loud, if you can. In your home, not outside of it. Stand in the room where your family gathers. Stand in the kitchen where you feed them. Stand at the door of the child who worries you most. Read the psalm in those places, not because the physical location changes the words, but because it changes you. Because standing in the kitchen and declaring he will command his angels concerning you is a different act than reading the same words in the abstract. You are placing the psalm in the specific geography of your household. You are declaring the covering over the specific rooms and the specific people and the specific struggles that those rooms contain. Read it slowly. Do not rush it. 3 times a day means nothing if those 3 readings are 3 hurried passes through familiar words. Give it 10 minutes. Sit with each line long enough for it to do something. Long enough to feel the weight of what is being promised. Long enough to let the fear that is present in you at that moment meet the specific provision of the specific line you are reading and be addressed. And when you finish, give thanks, specifically for something in your household that is still good, for something in the people you love that has not been lost, for some evidence, however small, of a God who has not abandoned your home. The gratitude is not the conclusion of the practice, it is the seal, the moment in which you confirm by the specific act of appreciation that the shelter is real, that it has been real today, and that you are building your life inside it and not outside it. Woman of faith, you are not holding your household together alone. You never were. The God of Psalm 91 has been at work in your home since before you knew to ask Him, before the worry began, before the drift happened, before the silence settled. He has been working in the interior lives of the people you love in ways that your eyes do not have access to and your prayers are only beginning to touch. The psalm does not start a process. It opens your eyes to a process that was already running. And what you will watch as you dwell in this psalm 3 times a day is not a miracle arriving from outside your household. It is the lifting of a veil. The slow, real, undeniable dawning of the awareness that the covering was always there. Stand in the shelter, read the psalm, let it build its structure inside you, and watch what God does in your home when a woman of faith stops trying to hold everything together by herself and starts declaring 3 times a day that everything is already held. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this has reached something in you that needed to be reached, I would be honored if you would share it with another woman of faith who is carrying her household today. Leave a word in the comments. Tell me what Psalm 91 has done in your home, or tell me what you are trusting it to do. And if you want to continue this walk together, subscribe to this channel. God bless you, and God bless every person under your roof.